Dynamo and Clarendon Partners have come together to provide an educational series around best practices and successful strategies to follow throughout your post implementation journey with FinTech. Clarendon Partners is a boutique woman owned consultancy that helps you engineer your organization's DNA to prepare for a more efficient, brighter, and agile future. We're pleased to welcome you to the third edition of this three-part series, the final countdown. Ready, set, launch. But wait, in the first segment, Michelle O'Connell, Dynamo's global head of implementation, will present tips around not underestimating your project team's needs, including how to prepare to have the right employees and subject matter experts involved. She will also discuss recommendations for smaller size firms versus larger organizations. In the second and final segment of this three-part series, Rob Fox, Senior Manager at Clarendon Partners, will discuss how to best get ready for what's new, a review of your post-implementation checklist. Rob will share how to prepare operations and accounting teams for the new system. Now, let's get started. Michelle is going to kick things off for us. Michelle, how do you prepare for the right mix of resources to ensure success?
So, as the head of implementations at Dynamo, I'm often asked the question during a conversation with a prospect about what does the project team composition look like on their side? How many people do they need? What roles should they be in? And this is certainly a key decision to make to ensure the success of your implementation. It's really important. The instinct is often to try to pick the most senior people possible and put them on the project team. But the challenge is that while their guidance is critical in terms of decision making and understanding requirements, often their days are filled with day to day responsibilities. And it's very difficult to get enough focus from those senior leaders during the project work. So it's really important to think about a concept of using tactical resources who can have some time allocated in their day to focus on the project, but then can go to those senior leaders and make sure that they are engaged in any key decisions, any key challenges, and things like that. Certainly, any business unit that will be using the system should have some kind of representation on the project team. Typically, I would recommend someone from with a little bit more of a technical inclination as well. Not that they're needing to have specific engineering skills or coding skills, but just someone who's comfortable navigating around something like an admin module and might understand a bit about making configuration changes and tends to be comfortable adopting new technology and navigating around new technology. It's really important to be honest when thinking about your project timelines and realistic. Oftentimes, clients can be a little bit optimistic and thinking about putting a system in a matter of weeks and not months. And they often don't necessarily think about what are the normal operations in their business that might come up during that project timeline that might pull people away from the project work. Those are normal, those are expected. And it's best just to be conservative and expect some of those unknowns to pop up and incorporate that into your project planning and project timeline planning. Certainly, the goal of every implementation is to make sure that we are set up for adoption, which means that we want the users who are licensed to be able to use the system well and feel comfortable using it when the project wraps up. And it's often an easy way to help achieve that is to make sure that those teams are incorporated in the project team in some way, that they're aware of the system, they're aware of the decisions, they're on board, they're engaged, and they're ready to go.
Michelle, what recommendations do you have for smaller size firms versus larger firms?
It's always a bit tricky thinking about scaling, right? So there's maybe some smaller firms that might have a handful of employees, all the way to very large firms with multiple global teams. So certainly it's a little bit different in each organization, given the size of their team and the size of their project teams. But certainly, again, the key stakeholders should be represented. There should be a team of people who have the time and the bandwidth to be engaged in the project work. and have the ability to get kind of the ear of the more senior decision makers when needed. We sometimes like to use a steering committee approach to make sure that those more senior resources are engaged. So perhaps we meet monthly with them, prepare a very efficient executive summary of the project status, any key challenges, obstacles, decisions to ratify, and make sure that we can meet quickly with them in 20 or 30 minutes, send the materials a day in advance so they have a chance to review them, and just kind of tee up any key discussion topics for those steering meetings. And that's a great way to make sure that those senior stakeholders are engaged as well.
How can firms best navigate to bring the right resources and ensure the right experts are being used?
One concept that I've heard about from the team at Clarendon, which I think is tremendously useful, is the concept of force amplification. And this really means figuring out who within your organization are those really key SMEs, decision makers. They know the business. Often those people's time is the most difficult to get because their calendars are quite full. So perhaps you might pull someone from their team onto the project team, but make sure that they have that direct path to that senior stakeholder to make sure that every decision we're making, requirements are aligned with their expectations.
Let's now move over to Rob to get his perspective. Rob, how far in advance should you think about building and hiring a project team?
When you think about a project team and building that team as you get into implementation for a new system, you should really be backing up from go live or even from user acceptance testing, because you may have new staff required that would require training. You may want those staff involved in user acceptance testing or other key phases of the program. So when you think about that and having new staff on board, you really need to back up from when you need them on board within your project timeline, and then account for things like training, backing up to onboarding, backing up to the hiring process, and backing up to the recruiting process. So when you think end to end, you may actually need 6 to 9 months in advance of user acceptance testing is when you should be posting your job. Even though it seems like a long time, by the time you go through recruiting, by the time that person gives their 2, 3, 4 weeks notice, by the time they're on board, by the time you've trained them up on what they need to know to be contributing effectively to the project team, 9 months may even be too short. So you certainly want to think about building your project team well in advance so that they're in seats and they're effective when you need them to be according to your project timeline.
Rob, how do you actually rally other users around being part of the roadmap?
So, in order to rally your full set of users around your system's implementation, you'll always have your star users that are the subject matter experts that are really relied upon for core business requirements and the nitty gritty. But if you want to be successful post go live, you really should be thinking about your full set of users and rallying that full set. The folks that aren't as involved are most likely to be poor at adoption, and you want to get to all of those folks. So really, communication, transparency, and involvement are probably the three biggest keys. People want to be kept up to date and know what's going on. They want transparency as to why it's going on, or if phase one is going to have limited benefit for them, you should tell them in advance so they're prepared and they don't go in there day one and expect that the system's going to do 10 things that it doesn't do yet. And then lastly, involvement is great. So to the extent you can have all of your users involved in user acceptance testing, for an example, they're going to be more involved. They're going to have some say in finding issues or errors and based on how they use the system. And generally, the more aware and involved folks are, the better involvement you'll have and the better adoption you'll have for them post go live.
What are key steps to think about in terms of driving a successful go live?
So to build on the theme of involvement, making sure that there's a robust training program for future users, that they're involved in user acceptance testing, um, and overall just making sure that you're thinking about all users and all steps to have them prepared for day one where they're ready to use the system, they're supported, they have whatever hands-on support they need in the immediate aftermath of go live when they're going to have more questions and challenges. than once they really know the system down the line. Um, and overall, thinking about preparedness for all of your users is critical.
Rob, how do you align your business strategy with your post go live implementation strategy?
So post go live, you're going to want to line up with your business strategy, and think about continuing up a really great communication plan. So communicating with your team and your users doesn't stop with day one. You want to highlight the benefits that they're seeing. You may want to be transparent about any challenges you have and show how you're resolving them. You'll want to track user adoption, and if you have folks that are not utilizing the system, pretty much every system you can get user logs these days, so you can track to see and make sure that everyone's using it as you would expect. And just generally, overall, keep up communication and champion the benefits. There's a reason why you're implementing the new system. It should be benefiting your users and your business as a whole, and you want to be highlighting that and celebrating the successes that you've seen through your go live and your early adoption of the platform.
Thank you again to our speakers, Michelle and Rob, and to Clarendon Partners for collaborating with Dynamo on this important three-part series. We hope that you've all learned some new best practices and tips around how to drive success both during and after your new technology implementation. Stay tuned for more compelling sessions with Dynamo's partners.